Welcome to episode 61, featuring the legendary Keith Roth.
Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Keith Roth, what is up, my brother? Welcome to 10,000 Miles.
It's been 10,000 years since I saw you, man, but
It's pretty crazy.
we got to do a few minute catch up, but hey, Vic,
Yeah, we're going to do that right away. Hey, before we do that, though, just take a minute and introduce yourself to the audience.
I am Keith Roth, and all right, Keith Roth from SiriusXM, from the Dictators, David Johansen, producer, and Frankenstein 3000. I mean, we can keep going. We can.
It's epic.
But that's basically the gist of it. And
Keith, the last time I saw you, I was wearing an Elvis costume.
I'll never forget that. And think about it. It was old Asbury Park. It was before
it was.
the Rising on Cookman Avenue, where the hipsters wouldn't walk down those streets because they'd be pretty scared. And,
Exactly.
And we we did the Mutant Monster Beach Party record at your studio, which was such a fabulous, fabulous time. And we were on the front cover of the East Coast Rocker.
Yeah.
And we're like, hey, Vic, you got to come up to our studio in Asbury Park. They want to take a photo. We got to take a photo for the cover. And wouldn't you know, you showed up in an Elvis costume, and it was hysterical. It was perfect. It was absolutely perfect.
Yeah, I'm like, what can I do that's completely outlandish? It was great. What a great time. You know, funny about the Mutant Monster Beach Party, Frankenstein 3000, was, when was it? Maybe a year and a half ago. We're at my buddy's house. He just moved and bought a amazing place in Colorado. And we get there, it's the first night, and we're out back, and a bunch of my friends are there and their wives. And one of my friends is like he just freaking loves music. He's a music guy. And so, the alcohol's flowing. People are starting to get, having some fun. And my friend Bing goes, hey, you got anything that you can stream that you produced? He goes, songs I'll know. And I'm sitting there and I go, I got exactly the perfect record. And we bust out the entire record. Dude, it's his favorite cover record of all time.
Look at that.
He loves it. Look, every time he's here, it's like, dude, you got to put that back on. And he just loved it.
I get in the mood to hear that record, every couple years, and I pop it on. And as I listen to it, the timeline just comes right back to me. I think of us and the time that we did it, because we didn't have much time. We didn't have much of a budget. And you singing those high harmonies on the sweet song. And we're like, all right, Halpern, you play drums on this. Damien, you play drums on. We're all grabbing instruments. And what we did in 48 hours was unbelievable, man.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun.
Keyboards too.
Yep, you played keys.
Yeah, it was great. It was really a good time. Keith, so for the audience, I've known Keith, gosh, what is it, 25 years now?
I mean, well, that Mutant Monster Beach Party record we did in 99. So it's
older, because we were just talking. We both impregnated our wives on an evening that Damien showed up with the Chinese elixir.
Yang tonic.
To do great thing for men, the Yang tonic, right? And so our kids are both 27 as a result of that Yang tonic. And longer than that. I've known you a couple of years before that. So. Oh,
I would say 30 years, because we did
30 years, man. Wow. Incredible.
We did a couple records before Mutant Monster. I think that might have been the last one that we did at your place in Westfield. And a couple of years ago, I was in Westfield as a Trader Joe's down the street from your old studio. Yeah. Bare bones. But I walked by it, and, I'm like, look, there's the roof.
Amazing.
It was amazing, and
what a great time.
It was a really amazing time.
I used to go see Keith play at the Brighton Bar.
Yeah. That was
your home away from home.
That was my home away from home. I mean, and the Brighton Barflies with our friend Rachel Bolin. It was like our own little CBGB right there. And
it was cool. Is it still there?
No, it went down. Actually, it made it all the way to the pandemic.
Really?
There's rumblings that Greg may resurrect the place, but I cut my teeth in that place.
Yeah, big time.
Probably played there without exaggerating, like 200 times at least, and had so much fun there. But looking at you, and we probably haven't talked or seen each other face to face. It's got to be
not in a bit.
Well, how long have you been in Dallas? You've been down there a long time.
18 years.
Yeah. So, I mean, did I see you in any time that you've been back since then?
No, I haven't seen you.
It might, like you said, it was probably at the
Yeah.
studio. And that record came out in 97.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. 97.
Well, we're going to make sure it's not another, 20 some odd years, near 30 years before this happens again. You look the same, which is amazing and great.
I feel the same.
Let's start going through your life a little bit. I want the audience to know more about Keith. You're on SiriusXM. And by the way, thank you for the occasional shout out, because my wife will be at the gym. They'll be listening to SiriusXM, and her trainer's like a real 80s metal guy. And all of a sudden you'd be like, yeah, here's a song from Alice Cooper's, co-written by a buddy of mine, Vic Pepe. And the guy will look at my wife and go, did he just mention your husband?
Yeah.
And she'll be like, yeah, that's Keith. I know Keith, and he's out spinning all the rock and roll music still, keeping the world alive.
It's funny because, when we play stuff that you worked on with Alice, and I was like, man, Vic worked on that. And, us being old school Alice Cooper fans, I like those records so much because, you love the Alice Cooper group. And and you brought a lot of that when you were making those records. And what's funny is actually the group and Alice have actually become really good friends of mine throughout the last.
Oh, that's so cool.
20 something years. But you worked on Hey Stupid, right? And you worked
on Hey Stupid. Yeah.
And
that was the only record I worked on, but there were a lot of cool tracks there. When we got a call from a guy named Bob Pfeiffer, who was the A&R guy for Alice. He signed him on the record prior when they did Poison.
Right.
He said, yeah, Alice wants to get on the phone. He liked the song you guys wrote. And he wants to put it on the record, but he wants to come out and write more. And Alice says, yeah, I want to really try to write something modern, but I want it heavily influenced by like all my old stuff. And so I went out and rebought every Alice Cooper record on cassette tape, because that was the portable medium at the time.
Right.
And I used to listen to those records morning, noon, and night, including when I went to sleep and I had one of those auto reverse tape players so you could listen to both sides of the cassette. And I would go to bed listening to tracks, and I would wake up and I'd listen to tracks. I was trying to infuse my brain so much with all the old stuff and the progressions and the style and the vocal patterns. And then, of course, trying to write something modern that was heavily influenced by that. It was no easy task. I think we get like maybe a B- on it. But there was some cool stuff that was, we did Feed My Frankenstein.
That which he still plays. He still plays.
And by the way, the backing tracks he uses are my vocals. That's me like 60 times.
You layering 60.
Yeah, I layered like 60 times.
See, now you're giving me good stuff to talk about on the radio. I saw my buddy Vic Pepe. He worked. Didn't Ozzy sing on that too, or no?
Ozzy sang on Hey Stupid.
Right. Okay. Feed My Frankenstein.
In the bridge, he did the You Know, I Know. Slash played guitar in that song. Ozzy sang background on it. Feed My Frankenstein features the great Steve Vai and Joe Satriani doing a duel.
And Nikki
going back and forth.
Nikki Sixx on bass, right?
I think so. I don't remember. And then Slash did something on the record. I forget what it was, but it was cool.
Yeah.
It was very cool.
Well, being an old school Alice Cooper fan, and I like Trash. I mean, I liked even Dada, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But Trash was really good. And then, your record, Hey Stupid, I never really fell off the Alice bandwagon, but that was when I think back of, and plus I'm a little partial to that because, my buddy Vic Pepe, who I made records with, did that album as well. But that was, I would give you more than a B- on that one. I'd give
Appreciate
you
it. Keith, walk us through your journey. Like, go back. Like, how'd you get into music?
I mean, I have two older brothers, my middle one being 12 years older than me. And ironically, playing with the Dictators, I mean, he went to kindergarten with Scott Kempner and Handsome Dick Manitoba. And so there was, ironically, right? It's crazy.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
So, I mean, the first guy I ever saw play an electric guitar in front of me was Scott Top 10 Kempner. I remember he had this blue Sparkle. I couldn't have been more than 3 or 4. And when my dad seemed like he always worked, but my mom worked as well. And he would come over, and bring that amp and play. I mean, he could have been the worst guitar player in the world, but when you're 4 years old and you see somebody with an electric guitar and it must have been a custom, right? And and you just don't forget those things. So but he was they were all into this cool music, this part of the Bronx. We all lived on, right off of White Plains Road, 80 Avenue. And it just seemed like, what bands that they were listening to, it took 30 years for everybody to catch up, like the Velvet Underground, the MC5, the Stooges, the Who, Cream, the Rolling Stones. This was going around my house, so it was embedded in me. And
that's crazy.
So I also knew that my brother's got a bit of OCD, which of course I have as well. But if his records had any little blemishes on it, he would just give them to me. And I had this really shitty little, portable, record player. So I remember like listening to 12 by 5 by the Rolling Stones at that age, like constantly. So that's where, where I fell in love, with music and being a fan of music.
Amazing. When did you start playing an instrument?
For real, I've always, probably about 16, 16, like, I knew chords and I could play some cover songs, but I realized that like, I could do this, man. I could do this because I always felt like I could write songs. And then when I was able to learn like, EAD, GDC, it's like, wait, now I can learn 10,000 and then,
you can learn 10,000 songs.
Yeah. I started writing and then, that's when the journey began of bands from like, being more of like a punk rock guy to like, I feel actually getting pretty good at it. I didn't really feel like I got pretty good at it till like about 12, 13 years ago, when you feel like.
How'd you get exposed to writing music? Like what made you believe you could write music? Somebody plant the seed in you?
No, you know what? People would play guitars and I would write melodies and like mostly goofy songs, like stupid songs.
Holy cow.
But people would be like, that's an amazing melody. And, it'd be like, about like our buddy over there, like, and coming up with like, some lyrics and a chorus and didn't realize, wow, I just wrote a verse, a pre-chorus and a chorus. And people like, you're a pretty good writer. So that always kind of stayed with me. And I always noticed too, when you guys were all making the records back in the 80s, it just seemed like anybody who had the real money was the guys that wrote the songs. So.
What's funny is that growing up, I got into guitar when I lived in New York. I grew up in Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. And my first lessons were group lessons. I used to take them at a high school. Where the heck was that high school? I forget what section. It was in Canarsie.
Okay.
It was in the Canarsie section of Brooklyn. I used to go with my dad. My dad had a side hustle. He was a mechanic on Saturdays. Loved cars. And right down the road was a high school. So I'd ride in with him to the gas station, bring my guitar, go to an hour and a half group lesson, come back and pump gas for tips. It was complete epic New York, type Brooklyn growing up lifestyle. But, I just knew that I had to learn music. I didn't. And so, we moved to New Jersey, started, the garage bands and all this stuff. And writing music just never seemed like something that I could or should do. I didn't have an influence about writing. I was still trying to learn riffs, still trying to learn music, still trying to learn how to, listen and I would play tricks with myself. I'd put a song on, I'd listen to it and I'd go, that's E, that's A, that's G, that's D. Oh, that's C sharp minor. And then I'd see if I can get the whole song without the guitar. So I had a lot of ear training because the guy I took guitar lessons from was blind.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So he taught me, he knew scales, he knew music, but he taught me a lot of ear training. And it wasn't until I met a guy named Doug Bates, who was like a Frank Zappa lookalike back in the day. And he was older than us, and he joined our band, our high school band.
When you
he
say
was a number of years out of high school.
When you say Frank Zappa look, I mean, that's pretty much 80% of, every New Jersey looking rock dude in this timeline. But go ahead. I got you.
He had the stash.
Right.
He had the ponytail and he had the big Adam's apple.
Right.
I mean, there was nobody who looked more like Zappa than Doug. And Doug was just a sweet, great guy who, he dropped out of high school. He was working for the town. He played cool guitars. He turned me on to Hendrix and Deep Purple and the Rolling Stones and Robin Trower. And like, he turned me on a lot of cool music, but, he's like, dude, we need to write originals. We ain't going to do shit on covers. We got to write originals. And it was like panic set in. It's like, write originals. And we wrote a few songs and a guy named Mark Ribbler?
Yeah, I do know Mark Ribbler.
Mark lived around the corner from me.
Where were you living?
I had Mark on the podcast. What's that?
Where were you living? You went from Brooklyn to what part of Jersey?
Jackson.
Oh, okay.
He lived around the corner from me, and he lived directly next door to a good friend of mine. And somehow, we may have seen him outside or knocked on the door, and I knew he had a studio in his parents' basement. And it was an 8-track, reel to reel. He had a little console. He built a little control room down there. His parents were unbelievable. And that was the first recording studio I ever stepped in. And we recorded like 3 or 4 covers and an original song. It was amazing. That was my first experience.
Did you ever put it out or think about putting it out?
I didn't put it out. As a matter of fact, I have to get a copy of it because the drummer in that band is sort of semi-retired now, but he's put together a whole home studio set of tools, and he's taken some of the tracks that were on cassette and he's loaded and stripped them. So for Doug sang Let Me Stand Next to Your Fire, Jimi Hendrix. That was one of the covers we did. And he re-recorded the whole song with Doug's vocal.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And so it was a cool, heavier version. He got most of it. He did a great job on it. He wants to re-record the original.
Interesting.
And I got to find the cassette somewhere. I think my brother has it.
Yeah. I mean,
the last copy of it.
You digitize everything. It's amazing when you go back. I mean, I still find stuff, in a drawer or something. I found a rehearsal tape probably about 5 years ago of like one of my first bands. And we did this mashup of Motley Crue, Wild Side with Lou Reed, Wild Side. So it would start with the tenths of like brown, and then everything of course was out of time. I mean, we were kids, but it was such a cool mashup that and now I've yet to refine the cassette again because I want to like actually upload it and say, hey, we were into mashups before, mashups became fashionable, but it's amazing when you find stuff and it just takes you on this mental journey. So, I mean,
totally.
It's pretty cool.
So you start playing guitar seriously like around 15 years old?
Yeah. I mean, I realized that guitar at that time was a little bit, chords. I wasn't really good at chords. I was good at bar chords. So I was like, let me take it easy on myself. Let me play bass. And that's
okay, cool.
And, we started this band with this guy, James Greenberg, who, me and my buddy Matt at the time. And, we were more like, we're rock guys, but we really couldn't play. But James Greenberg's, he saw something in us and we used to rehearse in the basement. And the first song that we really learned how to play was Xanadu by Rush, right? And it took 1 year, for the 1 full year, calendar year, for us to play it and play it well. And I'm thinking like, I think I might get out of this band thing.
Holy cow.
But little did I realize that after we learned how to play Xanadu,
you play any song you want.
The set grew from one song. The next year we had like 50 songs, like AC/DC, the Ramones, the Stones. It was like, oh my God, we were learning 2 or 3 songs a day. But it took that whole year of and learning how to play that stuff on the bass, which was pretty wild.
1 year.
1 year. And I swear to God, I told the story to Geddy Lee. And I said,
did you really?
I swear, yes. And he found it the most funniest thing ever. And he said, it took you a year to learn how to play Xanadu. I'm like, it was my first band. I never had lessons, But, after that, and interesting enough, I played in a lot of shitty bands after that, right?
Okay.
But our mutual friend, Dave Halpern.
Yeah.
Was working at Musicians Workshop, and I was kind of dipping a toe in there. And if you remember, your Jackson buddy, Zach Wild, worked there. Yeah. So I was a huge Ramones fan. I was always into punk rock. And Dave Halpern comes in the workshop, and he says, I was hanging out with Dee Dee Ramone this weekend, and he's going to quit the Ramones, and he's going to start this band called Sprocket, and he's talking to me about maybe playing drums. And I'm like, now, the Ramones is a band, and probably the only band at that time that I could actually be in professionally. So I go home and I grab a Ramones album, a current one, and I see that their manager's name is Gary Kurfürst. So I get Gary Kurfürst's phone number out of, information, 212-555-12, right? Yeah. I call the office and I'm like, hi, I want to audition for the Ramones. This is Keith Roth, blah, blah, blah. And she goes, excuse me? Well, I go, I know that Dee Dee left the band and I'd like to get it. And she goes, can you hold on a second? And I swear to God.
It's all on the DL.
Gary Kurfürst gets on the phone with me and he goes, how you doing? I'm like, good. He goes, so what do you mean that Dee Dee Ramone? And I explained, I said, a friend of mine, of course I embellished the story.
Yeah,
I said,
sure.
told me that I would be perfect for the Ramones and that Dee Dee just quit. Literally, Dee Dee must have told them he quit like that day. So like, can you curse on here?
Yeah, you could do whatever you want.
Who the fuck is this kid? So he's like, I'm like, I want to audition, blah, blah, blah. And I kept calling the office, like one of the auditions. And finally he said, there's going to be a cattle call at SIR on, I don't know if this was Monday, on Thursday at like 7 a.m. At 7 o'clock. So I said to him, I go, and I was totally serious. I go, AM or PM? And I was totally serious. I was like 20 years old or whatever I was. And he said, that's very funny. So I showed up at SIR, brought my bass, went in the musician's workshop, got it set up and showed up at SIR. And when I walked in, there was CJ Ramone, the guy that wound up getting the gig, and a couple other people. And so I went in there and the tech goes, the big strobe tuners. He goes, you know how to use this? And I'm like, yeah. And I walk in there and he goes, just give me your fucking bass. And I was like, no, he goes, no, don't worry, because none of these idiots know how to use it anyway. And he tunes it up and I walk on stage and there was no Joey. It was Johnny and Marky. And I forgot what song they called out. And it took me about 20 seconds to catch up to the speed that they play at, because it's a lot fast. But seriously, Vic, the only thing I really knew how to play was like every Ramones song. And before all I spent was morning, noon, and night learning tunes. So after about 2 or 3 songs, Johnny's like, oh, so, who do you play with? And I started like embellishing these band names and all this shit. And he said, and I started calling out tunes and I was making those guys laugh. They got, they're kind of like, kind of curmudgeon-y, but I got him. We were talking a little bit about sports because I knew he was a Yankee fan. So Monty Melnick, their manager, took my name down and he said, we'll call you back. And about a week, 2 weeks later, I got a call back and I went down and I did it again. And this time Joey was there and it was now it was really like over the edge, like, and I was like, holy shit. And by the way, when I first went down there and auditioned with and by the way, this is going to be in the Ramones documentary that they're working on now. But while I was playing with Johnny and Marky, I started laughing, like after the second song. Like I'm laughing and they were like, what's funny? And I'm like, dude, it's Johnny Ramone and Marky. It's like I was in a dream. It wasn't like reality. So anyway, after the second audition, which, now I was really diving in, Monty said, listen, we'll give you a call and let you know, like if you're, if you need to come back or maybe, and I got along with all the guys. And then about a couple days later, I got a call that I didn't get the audition. And at that time, Zach had joined Ozzy. I was like kind of on that food chain. I'm like, you're the next guy. You're being the Ramones. This is perfect. But in all honesty, that was probably the only pro band that I could have been in at that point because I knew the song so well. And the funny thing is I know Monty now, and he told me that really only about 3 or 4 people got a second call. But I really took it serious and I really knew the tunes well. And so that was like a
freaking epic story.
That was the first real good band that I ever played with was the Ramones. And that's
amazing.
And then, my band Bad Biscuit after that got to open up for them. But that at that moment when I didn't get the gig, I felt like this is what I'm going to do. I'm thinking that if I got that close, I could do this. I just need to get better and learn more than just Ramones songs,
You were 20 at the time?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. You got close at 20. That's, the only guy who got closer at a younger age is, Zach.
Yeah. Well,
right.
Yeah. We're like the same age. Right. So,
yeah.
I mean, that was, just what was happening in our area. You were making out on Scooper Records, Snake finally gets a band together that, becomes successful. I worked at Close Encounters, on Route 35. That's where I met Snake and, John Bon Jovi. Dorothea used to work there and, they weren't really that big. John was like opening for somebody. She used to bartend, but he exploded, right? He exploded. Then those Skid Row guys got that rolling and Zach playing Saturday nights with Cyrus. You guys were working, doing all this great.
That was nuts.
it was, Mark Weiss was becoming the photographer. Our whole area was exploding. It was insane. What was going on.
Who I had on the podcast a couple months ago is a guy named Rob Shanahan. Do you know Rob at all?
Bass player.
No, he's a photographer. So he's the West Coast guy. And if you look him up, robshanahan.com, he's got 2 books out now called Volume 1 and Volume 2. They're all like a guitar volume knob set to 1 and 2.
That's great.
And his collection is of stuff he's caught, epic Van Halen shots, Aerosmith, Ringo Starr, Rush, Christina Aguilera. Dude, I mean, like, the names are ridiculous. And so I said to him, and this is before I had him on the podcast, I go, dude, you're like the West Coast Mark Weiss. And he goes, no, I'm the West Coast Rob Shanahan. I said, touche. It was great. I got to tell you a funny story. Rob told me he's on Ringo's plane and they're flying somewhere, and it's the band and Rob and Ringo, and he was pretty good friends with Charlie Watts. That's how he met it, because Rob's also a drummer. Like, really, like, he calls himself, I'm a drummer first who happened to get really great at photography. Super cool dude. You love him. He's a really great dude. But Ringo looks around on the plane. He goes, we're in a Ringo's private jet, and the front 4 seats, 2 face this way, 2 face that way. Then there's stuff behind. He goes, and I'm right across from Ringo. And Ringo looks around and goes, oh dear, I hope this plane doesn't crash, because if it does, the papers will read, Ringo Starr dies with others. I'm like, oh my God.
And how true.
How true. It's the greatest thing I ever heard.
That is great.
So you go from auditioning with for the Ramones,
right,
getting a call back. You got pretty freaking close. And then when did Bad Biscuit come together, or what was the succession of next bands? Like, what happened?
Yeah, that was pretty much the next band after that, because I had met, the late great Tommy Tafaro from the Close Encounter days. He was playing with JD, John DeServio, and Greg Locascio, and I always loved Tommy as a player. Those guys were incredible at that age, because kids your age, but these guys are playing like Phantom of the Opera and like all these crazy epic, Dreamer Deceiver. So I ran into Tommy at Musicians Workshop, and I said, I'd love to do something with you. I know people. Yeah, like we can get, and he said, well, I know a singer, and he knew the other Tommy, and we started getting together, and then we were trying to come up with tunes, and we're like, let's just have some fun. I know a guy plays drums, Steve Grossman played drums, and John Borneo, who still I see all the time, lives down the street from me. I still see him constantly, and he always wanted to do something. But those guys I didn't think would want to be in, like, my punk rock kind of, and me and Tommy, the singer guy, were really, we loved the Pistols and the Dead Boys and Squeeze and Joe Jackson, all that stuff. So we said, let's start a cover band, have some fun. And we started doing like Sex Pistols, LA Guns, Faster Pussycat, Johnny Thunders, all this crazy stuff. And we wound up getting a residency at the Playpen. Like,
oh, that's amazing.
Because we were doing something different than like the Edgar Casey guys, because they're playing like, Robin Trower and Badlands and Queensryche and
Van Halen.
Right. Yeah. So we're doing like something, and people started coming out and seeing us, and we had like a little following going on, and we played a lot, and we started developing our chops. And then, we had and then we switched over to an all original band at that point. And, we did some cool stuff. We played with the Ramones, and we opened for Bon Jovi and Joan Jett. And, we made a record with Tom Allom, who was legendary producer.
Yeah.
We got our record out, and, we kind of, for me, that was like, learning all the things not to do ever again. And, but I learned a lot of lessons that I took out of it. And, it was, I look back, it was like 5-6 years of my life, but it was, looking back, it was a good time. So I learned a lot of, so the Ramones was like my high school music education. And then, Bad Biscuit was like college. And then the rest was like, okay, get out into the real world now. And,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
So you were always, a guy that I thought was rediscovering himself in the best of ways. Like, you weren't a guy that was stuck in doing one thing. You're always trying different things. You did it sort of fearlessly. At least that was my impression. I don't know if you were, scared to bejesus while you were doing it, but you were just like going for it, doing different stuff and putting yourself out there. How did you get into radio?
Well, the funny thing is, after Bad Biscuit, I just said to myself, I'm just going to do things that I want to do. I'm make the kind of music that I want to. I'm not following any trends. I just want to, my influences are on my, it's the Stone, whatever. And I just want to do what I do. And if people like it, cool. And if they don't. So while I was in Bad Biscuit, when the record was out, this girl, was coming out, this girl, Amy Christie, who you probably know.
I know Amy.
Yeah. Came out and did like a little story. She was running a magazine. She came to a couple shows. And so, she starts working with Charlie Watts and Ronnie Wood. She becomes their publicist for Continuum Records. So she would come down to where we were living in Long Branch and kind of really like the area. She was living in the Lower East Side at that point. And she moves down to Jersey and, moves to Long Branch. And then she calls me one day and she said, I spoke to the general manager there at this new radio station called The Rat 95.9. And, I pitched them a show and she goes, I thought you'd be really good to be my co-host.
Wow.
And I heard the station, which is cool, but I'm like, Amy, to be honest with you, I'm not really that guy. I can't be like Memorial Day weekend, 9 in a row with Van Halen and Korn. And she's like, no, we could play, between who and I know, we can get guests down here and we could play whatever we want as long as it doesn't have profanity. So I'm like, sure. Yeah.
What year is this, by the way?
98.
All right. So wait a minute. Let me think for a second. Many years before that, and I'm trying to think of what year it was. Crazy story I'm going to tell you. My brother, pardon me, who's in the radio business, calls me one day and goes, hey, want to make some money? I go, yeah. He goes, we're doing a project at a radio station. We got to do a bunch of rewiring, got to put in another console. We got to do this and that. It's in Long Branch. And we got to knock it out in like 36 hours. So we're not going to be sleeping. Like they can only keep the station off air or whatever. We got some time to do it. We're starting at like 7 at night and we're going straight through or whatever. And my gig was I was set up at this workstation and they'd yell TRS 2 female XLR at 26 feet. And boom, I'd make the cable and run it in. And dude, 36 hours I made cables. And my brother and the guy he worked for and 2 guys put in some new equipment there. So chances are you were broadcasting through some wires that I made.
There's no doubt about it. I mean,
if that was still there, unless they had changed stuff since then. But I think it might have been it was late 80s, early 90s, maybe.
Well, that building, I think that and they still broadcast out of, I think started in the 60s. They've been through the whole timeline, from, the hippies walking down Belmar through the 70s,
Totally.
It's been through, but the Rat has been there. I think they started in 96. So this might have been 97, Vic. I think we might have, it was 97 or 90. We did our 20, it was 98. We started in 98.
Okay. It might have not been the Rat when I was there.
No, it probably wasn't.
It was before that. So anyway, Amy Christie says, I need a co-host.
Right. So, now me and you, had made the Mutant Monster Beach Party record between all this great history. And, we got our, we became fathers, So meanwhile, my daughter, it was like, she's like 5-6 months old. So it was definitely 98, right?
Okay.
Cause I think your daughter and my daughter are very close to almost the same.
My son and your daughter. My son was born in 98, January.
What date?
The 17th.
14th. January 14th.
That was a miracle.
And we worked together we were making that record together, right?
It was the Yang Tonic.
The Yang Tonic from the late great Damien Kane.
Great dude.
Great dude. So she calls me up and she's like, I got a meeting with these people. Can you come in? Now I'm not going to get this gig, but I'm home during the day, working or, taking care of the kid. And I'm like, you know what? Get me out of the house. I'll go to this meeting. She'll fall asleep. I'll get out for a little bit. So I take the meeting. I drive down to Belmar. She's in the back. I take her out of the thing. I walk into the meeting. My hair is sticking up like this.
Yeah.
I hand wrote my playlist. David Bowie, The Sweet, Ramones, The Germs, and I walk in and they're all sitting at this big,
with the
baby,
Epic.
Weekday, whatever. And they're all sitting at this big table, all these corporate guys sitting around. And I walk in, I put the baby right. I don't care. Care. And I put the baby on I throw them the list, and I'm, cordial and nice. And the great Dan Finn, who's, he's the guy. And he goes, you know what? This may sound crazy, but there's something about you two. I'm going to green light this. And he told us right then and there. I'm like, really? So, it took a couple months for it to actually happen. And then we started doing the Electric Ballroom. And within like 6 months, we had, the Ramones down. Me and Joey and Amy got to interview Alice Cooper, John Paul Jones, because she had drive and she was a publicist. She's basically Bobby Fleckman in Spinal Tap. Yeah,
exactly.
So we had everybody come down and we're building these relationships, and the show blew up and we're getting press. And I did that, and then that's when Sirius came a calling.
Were you getting paid for that show?
For the ballroom?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was getting paid, but
amazing.
Nothing, it paid, it bought me gas. It might have paid the electric bill,
All right. It leads to good things.
Yeah. There was little, right. So, I was still doing other gigs to survive. But then, a couple of years into that, I get a call from, if I'm interested in doing a punk rock show for Sirius Radio. Now, I don't know what
year is this?
This is 2002.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Time ago.
Long time ago. This was 2002. I get a call, punk rock show, and they're like, and then you could do a weekend on First Wave. And I had no idea what any of this means. I don't know what satellite radio is. It's in the city in Midtown. But now the bread, and she's like, and this is, so the bread was worth it for me to come into the city if I was going to get this gig. And, I'm always in the city. No big deal. So I took the meeting, and I'm like, not sure it was just like Wayne's World. Like, I don't know what satellite radio is.
Yeah. Okay.
So I go to the building on Avenue of the Americas, and I get off the elevator and I walk through those glass doors, and it was like I was on the Starship Enterprise.
Totally.
I was like, holy shit. And then while I'm there, I see Meg Griffin, Carol Miller, Pat St. John. They're all there. And I'm like, I better educate myself really quickly about this. And I took, that's when I really like, holy shit, this is something amazing. Something starting here.
So have you been on SiriusXM for 23 years?
I got hired in 2002 and I started in 2003. So I've been on the air since 2003. Yes.
Wow, dude.
Yeah. 22 years. Yeah.
Congratulations. That's unbelievable.
Well, there was like 50,000 subscribers, when I started. And, me and like 3 other people are the only ones that have lasted this long since that time,
What's your show called now again?
I've done so many, but the last 10, 15 years I've been working for Ozzy's Boneyard. Ozzy looks the channel with Sharon. And then,
do they really? They oversee the channel? How's that work? Explain to people how that works.
Well, we play Ozzy every hour with Sabbath and on his own. And, they kind of, he does a show up there called Ozzy Speaks. And, listen, there's busy people. It's not like they're, constantly, but, he's lukewarm to a lot of the cool stuff. We get to do it's a partnership with Sirius and using the name.
And so you do the Boneyard.
I do Ozzy's Boneyard. Yeah. This was before the merge too. It was just Sirius. Then there was XM, like we're Sirius, we're better than XM. And then and then when the merge happened. So since I've been there, I've been on Octane, Left to Center, Buzzsaw, then the Boneyard, then it became Ozzy's Boneyard. So I do that, weekdays, 6 to midnight. And, I've been on Hair Nation, which is something, which is kind of, when it was happening, listen, we all had friends that, was into a lot of that stuff. Of course I liked Guns N' Roses and LA Guns, but a lot of that other stuff I really wasn't into. I wasn't into Queensryche or Cinderella. And then from working on the channel and meeting the people and then, meeting the guys that are in the bands, and then,
Yeah.
doing some of these Monsters of Rock events. They're like the coolest, nicest fans and bands. It's like, and then all of a sudden discovering these groups, and I'm like, these groups are amazing. I mean, a lot of them were shit. But some of them, like,
there were the group, but there are a lot of really great, like Kiefer's amazing talent.
Amazing talent.
Like Tommy Kiefer he's legit, right? That dude he's just the same guy with a little smaller hair, an amazing guitar player, a great songwriter. He's got a shtick, or not shtick. He's got his niche as a singer. Even his new stuff, man. I mean, I think sounds unbelievable.
Yeah, the Tom Kiefer band. I mean, we've done
Tom Kiefer band sounds great.
I mean, Frankenstein played with the Tom Kiefer band quite a bit, and we even played with Cinderella, throughout the years. And
amazing.
But guys like Winger, and then you listen to the music. It's unbelievable how talented these guys, and bands like Firehouse, and Bill Levitree. These guys are incredible players, I mean, and so, when you get past all of that, and like, I'm like, it was like later life, I got to, appreciate. And so I at first, when they told we're going to put me on Hair Nation, when the merge were like, we're going to put you on, I'm like, you might as well just fire me, because I had like a lot of gigs going on. I wasn't thinking long term. I'm like, oh, I'm good for like a year, and Greg Steele's like, you don't want to do that, dude. We're going to get into some really bad times. So this was like in 08 or whatever.
Okay.
And, but then by about 2010, 11, I kind of threw myself into it. And that's one of my favorite things to do. And of course, working with David Johansen, that all started through Meg Griffin at SiriusXM. And
is that how? Yeah, I was going to ask you, how did that all come about? Because you say you produced David Joe. Just so you know, I'm probably one of the few guys you'll run into that is a Johansen fan, and early on, because my brother is 5 years older than me. So while I'm in pre-high school, he's entering college, and he becomes part of the concert staff at Fairleigh Dickinson University. And Johansen's playing concerts. And so anytime he's playing concerts, my brother's helping load in and load out. Right. So he's just hands, right. And there were a number of shows that he's like, hey, you want to come up and hang out with the band and like touch gear and do cool shit? And so he was a cool big brother, and he brought me in. Dude, I lugged gear for Todd Rundgren in Utopia,
right,
for David Joe, for Robert Gordon.
All great guys too, right?
Yeah, really, really cool. And so Johansen, was just like, when I was listening to David Johansen, people were looking at me like, what the, his cover of, God, what was that song again?
Animals Medley.
I've been standing in the jungle for how long, trying to, oh no, baby. Let's make romance, right?
Yeah.
The whole thing. And then obviously Buster Poindexter way after that. But, so tell me about your meeting with David Johansen and how it all came about and how the relationship evolved.
Well, we'd met really briefly before he started working at Sirius. So I think we Frankenstein did a show with him, and then I started seeing him around campus up there. And by this point, now I've worked at Sirius for about a year and a half. So I'm pretty close with Meg Griffin and, Carol and, Mark Goodman. Like, we were all part of that family. It's not like, So, Meg thought it was funny to have me come on while those guys were doing their show and kind of be like the idiot savant. Cause they're like, all, doing, like kind of, emulating Arthur Schopenhauer and these great philosophers. And, and then in comes me, which, it was kind of like a fun skit, like on all that stuff. But then, one day Meg had to go away for a couple of weeks, and she needed somebody to come in and produce the shows. And, so she thought of me right away, and me and David did it. And it was just like, boom, like instant chemistry. And, we hit it off really well. And then, it seemed like I was starting to fill in for her a lot more. And I remember I had to drop something off in Meg's desk, and it said, she left like a note for herself, call Keith and make this happen. And I knew what she was going to do. She wanted me to. And also the other thing is, I'm coming up there late at night. David likes to come up there late at night. She's there at 7 a.m, and she's, working on her channels. It was just a perfect fit. So, I got the call like literally a day or two, and she said, can you talk? And I'm like, hey, but I knew she was going to ask me to produce his show, and he wanted me to produce his show. And so that's how it started. And that was this is probably like '04 or late '03, '04, somewhere in that timeline. And I wound up, from working with him until, he just passed away, like a month ago. And, we became really, really close. He was like my big brother, my little brother. He used to call me his priest, his rabbi. We became really tight. And then, of course, getting to be in the Johansen group with him and doing shows with him and knocking some stuff out with him in the studio. And, I learned a lot from him. And, it was such a positive experience in my life to be around the guy that's always the smartest guy in the room, and just a real grounded. People don't realize, people thought he was a little bit, because he really, he didn't have patience for musicians, with 3 chords and thinking that they got their nose connected to God. He's one of these guys that would talk to, he was a real New York guy, and like a classic New Yorker, he'd help people, and, and just very smart and very spiritual in a lot of ways. So it was quite an honor to do that. And it's, it's still, even though I was expecting it, it's still kind of weird that he's not on the planet. But,
for those who might not know who David Johansen is, look up the New York Dolls.
Yeah.
And look at the creation of a movement.
Yeah. A complete,
because the New York Dolls began a lot of stuff and laid a lot of tracks down for a lot of people. It was pretty epic.
There's like 10,000, like all those bands, like, the New York Dolls, the Velvet Underground, they might not have sold record amount of numbers, but they started all these bands that became iconic, and they wouldn't have existed without the New York Dolls or the Stooges.
No way.
Or the MC5. And David was, like Morrissey was his biggest fan. He said, it took the people 30 years to understand what they were doing. And that was a band that I caught when I saw them on Don Kirshner's rock concert when I was like, whatever age that was. And I was floored. I mean, I had that first Dolls record as far back as I could remember. And, but he's, everything that, he's one of the, like I said, one of the greatest, people I've ever met, one of the greatest experiences I ever had in life. And, it was really weird because, when Mara, his wife, said, listen, you better come, I knew he was been sick for a while, but he kind of had it in check. And, status quo, the Scorsese did the documentary on him, all that was going on. And, he would have his bouts, but he always, like Lazarus, keeps coming back. And so everything was kind of, you get used to that,
the human body is an amazing machine. Watching my parents go through illness and doctors telling me, he might not be here by the morning. And then you come in the morning and he's sitting up in bed eating like a bowl of soup or taking a nibble on his breakfast. And he's like, and the doctor's like, Mr. Pepe, do you know where you are? He goes, yeah, I'm in the hospital. You know what day it is? Yeah, it's Wednesday. Do you know why you're here? Yeah. And then a nurse would come in and give him medicine. You know what that medicine's for? He goes, yeah, it's for my sugar or something like that, whatever. And doctor would look at me just like they were ready to check, please. And then he'd bounce back for months before he'd have another turn. So I understand. That's why I tell you that story.
No. And, I went, my parents, same thing,
Yeah.
I mean, but he kept battling back. And then around the holidays, he took a fall and broke his back, literally. And they put him in home hospice. And, so when Mara said, hey, you might want to come see David this week, my expectation was like, this is the last time I'm going to see the guy. And it actually was. But when I left there, that wasn't my expectation, because when I went and saw him, at his home, and, looked great, the hair, the face, the whole thing.
Unbelievable.
Looked amazing. And then he gets up.
His hair was done?
No, his hair was just like, the classic David, even though it's like, but it's David, I mean,
it's David.
I've seen him worse than that 20 years before that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He looked great. And, but then he gets out of bed. I mean, I had broken back, right? He gets out of bed and he sits over and he's sitting at the table and we're talking. And then Mara said, well, he was in home hospice, but he's no longer in home hospice. Now he's just, the back is healing, and then, he's going to be back to the status that we're used to. So we made plans to see each other. I guess, let's say that was a Tuesday, to see each other that Saturday. And then, when I called him a couple days before, he wasn't feeling that great. So, but now just thinking maybe, just a little under the weather, he's back sealing. And then the Dictators, we were doing some dates, with Steve Conti, and Steve, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Well, Steve was in the New York Dolls, as you know, for many years.
Yep.
So we're playing together. He's doing support for the Dictators, and we're up in Woodstock, New York, and we're playing this place called the Colony, and it was packed. And a lot of people in the audience were wearing these Sweet Relief shirts, which were, money for that people were contributing to David because, he hasn't been able to work. I mean, the last thing he did was those shows at the Hotel Carlisle for which became the Scorsese documentary. And, he was very much against that. Even when I saw him, he was like, I'm like, David, you've always helped, let people help you, man,
Yeah.
And he wasn't thrilled about it, but it got done. So anyway, after the gig, after we finished the show, I ran out and I assembled some people in the crowd just to see him, wearing the shirts. And I took a picture of a few people and I texted it to Mara, and she responded back that he had just passed. And I'm like, yeah. And I was like, wow.
Oh my gosh.
So ironically, Steve and me with the relationship with David right around the same time, it was, we were together for the group of shows that followed, kind of like comforting each other because of the relationship we had. And we went out and played some Dolls songs as tribute, but, that was, it was very, and then me and actually Meg Griffin just did a big radio tribute to him, came about a month ago where we shared some personal stories, but,
cool.
I love the guy. And,
yeah, he was an amazing talent.
Yeah, I'm blessed to know that he had a heart of gold. And, I'm sure he's in the controller's ears up there, telling him things that need to be corrected down here.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
But that was a great.
Through the radio gig, do you have any memorable, interviews that you've done with people or other people that surprised you that you got to chat with and maybe,
I've done over 1,000 of them or close to it.
Wow.
I mean, the ballroom, 25 years, it lasted all the way to July of 2024. And really for the last 9 years of it, we had a guest every week. I mean, one of the coolest things, that come to mind was, when me and Tom Morello got to host Kiss playing the Whiskey A Go-Go to like 150 people. That was pretty
Amazing.
damn cool. And,
that's cool. Did
a lot of shit with those guys and, a lot of great times with John Paul Jones. I mean, hanging with John Paul Jones, Led Zeppelin. I mean, like it's sick, and really building relationships with all the Ramones through radio and Alice Cooper, and me and Dennis Dunaway have been close for, from the Alice Cooper band for years.
Yep.
You meet a lot. There really has not been too many dicks, to be honest with you.
Well, that's cool. That's
even
good
Richie
to hear.
Blackmore.
Well, we breed good stock in the music business.
Yeah. I mean, mostly. I mean, some people have their guard up, but once you get to know them, they're even like, I heard horror stories about Richie Blackmore, right? Richie, I think is all right, man. He's one of those guys that'll like kind of bark at you. And if you bark back, he's like, all right,
all right, cool.
But, I mean, yeah, so many, Ian Hunter, I mean, on a personal level, people you always looked up to, the ones that you get a little excited about, and it gets to the point too, after you do it for so long, it's like, yeah, that's cool, but I'd rather go see, my buddies down at the corner, have a beer and a burger at this point, I mean, but so
you did over 1,000 interviews. Is the format of your show now? Do you bring people on?
I mean, with Sirius, since I don't do the ballroom anymore, so that was, I mean, sure. Like, I mean, who did I have on recently? I had Slash, he had his blues record come out. I had, Bruce Dickinson from Iron Maiden. I'm
nice.
With Sirius, it's more of like, I'm not, I'm basically following the format of, Ozzy's Boneyard, which is the stuff we grew up on, Sabbath, AC/DC, Aerosmith, so, I mean, if they ask me to do interviews, I will, but, we were booking our own guests for all those years, but I do a podcast with, Don Jameson. So every week we have rock guys coming on talking sports or sports guys talking rock. So that's more, like
freaking love it.
Yeah. It's
how many episodes do you have under your belt
for the Rock Strap
for the podcast? Yeah.
We started in, June of, 24. So we've done every week since then, or maybe missed.
Nice. So you're
not 40.
You're approaching the 100 mark, right? Oh no, June of 24.
Yeah.
So you're coming up on a year.
Yeah. It's fun though.
Cool.
I mean,
it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. I've gotten to the point where if it ain't fun and I don't like it, we're old enough to be like, I ain't going to do it. It's like,
that's why I do this. You remember Adam Curry, right?
Of course.
Yeah. So he's been a friend of mine for 35 years. And he's been well, first of all, he's the co-inventor of podcasting. I don't know if you remember that or know that. His nickname is the Podfather. I'm going to send you a video where Steve Jobs says, yeah, I met this guy named Adam Curry and I talked to him about this thing he was doing. Adam started putting audio and radio shows on RSS feeds.
Wow.
And that people would subscribe via RSS. But because, bandwidth was shit back then, you'd take all night downloading this thing. And he was putting them on this thing called the Mac drive. This was just like before cloud was cloud, you got a little space on the Mac drive. And so he got on the radar of Jobs. And his guy said, hey, there's this guy. He's putting so much shit on the Mac drive. Like, we got to shut him down. And he's like, what's he got up there? He's got these audio files and people are subscribing to the RSS feeds. And he's got this radio show called The Daily Source Code. And Jobs is like, no, let him go. Let's see where this thing goes. And the light bulb went on for Jobs, and he wanted to include it on the iPod. And so he gets a call from a guy, Steve's guy, and says, hey, Steve would like to meet with you. He wants to talk about this thing you're doing with your audio feeds and the Mac drive and whatnot. And so he flies out, and he's in LA at the time, getting ready to get on stage like the next day. And he says, Adam, what are you doing with this audio? And he says, well, I've been broadcasting since I'm 16. I did the MTV thing, but that was out of my niche. I'm really like a radio guy, and I've done syndicated shows, and I've done all that. And Steve looked at me and said, Adam, I want to build radios for you.
Wow.
And he said, yeah, what do you want to do? He goes, I want to include on this thing. It wasn't called podcasting yet. Mm-hmm. I want to put a spot where you can, and he goes, and Steve had it all ready to go, and he didn't need my permission, but he just wanted my blessing. And Adam, being like the patriot that he is, like patriot for radio, he's like, I just want people to be able to broadcast. This gave people the ability to do this.
Right.
Those were the seeds for us to have a channel, to have a show, to produce, to create, and not need some, open up of glass doors and see the Starship Enterprise, right?
Right.
This gives the little guy an opportunity to go out there and create. So that was the beginning of it. I'm friends with Adam, and he's like, he's created this thing called Podcasting 2.0, where he's got another index that's outside of Spotify and outside of Apple Podcasts. And you basically can publish your podcast on the 2.0 index. And then there are 50 or 75 tools and little podcast favorite apps that you can download and access all this stuff. The most popular one, I think, is called Fountain. Podverse is another. But what Adam did in creating this index, he created this thing called value for value. And so let's say Keith has a show and he calls it, Punk Rock Mania, and you publish it on the 2.0 index. And I subscribe to it and I'm listening to it through Fountain. And I go, man, Keith is awesome, man. I can't get this programming anywhere else. You know what? I'm going to donate to Keith. So you, via digital wallet, now you can donate crypto.
Right.
Okay. So, and let's say Keith's show's got Amy Christie and you're 50-50 in your digital wallet. You could say any money that comes in crypto, we split 50-50. Or let's say you got a guy or gal with the gear, or a producer, or somebody you want to give 2% to the people doing the artwork and 5% to somebody managing the show and the subscriptions and all that. You can set up your digital wallet. That money automatically fans out to everybody so your hands off, right? It's not like you're getting it, you're paying me. It's like it just happens.
Right. That's amazing.
Adam gets 2% of all transactions that come across it because he wrote the protocols for it with a partner, right? So it's amazing. And they have tens of thousands, and they might even be approaching 100,000 different shows on there right now. It's completely insane. My show broadcasts across all audio platforms as well. So if you went to a website called episodes.fm and typed in 10,000 miles, you'll see I'm on like 30 audio platforms. You'll see it out there. I do that with a publishing service called Blueberry. Dude, I've received donations. People are listening on audio in countries that completely, they blow my mind. Like, why is somebody listening to me in like Iran? How did that happen? And then I listen, is it a bot? No, they listen to 76% of the episode.
That's incredible.
Right? It's freaking incredible. And the micro measurements of Bitcoin is called a Satoshi. And you get sats, you get Satoshis, I got 5,000 Satoshis. It's like, I don't know, 20 cents, but it adds up. Then it comes in its way. Well, now he's released a way to live stream. And so what he's done is he's created a switcher. So let's say you are spinning let's say I'm an artist. I publish my music to the 2.0 index. You are doing a radio show where you're only spinning independent records, independent music. You can set the wallet to give that money to the artist when he or she's song is playing. You'll get the time you're talking. Maybe you'll get the first 10 seconds or 20 seconds, or you can delegate how much they get. He's also now doing live shows. So he set up this infrastructure that allows people to go to a venue, live cast the show all over the world. He did a show in Nashville. The artist made $7,000.
Wow.
Obscene.
I was there yesterday. I wish I would have.
They social media'd the shit out of it. They broadcasted, right? People had followings and subs, and it's not. So he said to me, I don't know why you don't have a podcast, man. You'd be unbelievable. I go, who am I going to have on? He goes, dude, get on your friends. You got to let, a lot of cool people.
Yeah.
And so, okay, you're episode number 2. So I started in March of last year.
Of 24?
I think this will be episode 60.
Mm-hmm.
I've done one every week. I double up in May and June, and then in October and November. So I don't have to record through the summer or record through the holidays.
Right.
So I'll do 2 a week and put one in the can. But it's been a blast. Dude, I'm so much smarter as a result of this platform because people have so much wisdom and so many stories. So not only smarter from an information perspective, but like my brain is full of happiness. Like this story you told me tonight about the Ramones. Dude, I'm not going to forget that. That's unbelievable. And I never knew that about you.
And we had known each other. We met probably, way after that. But what you just said is really, you do things to make you happy. And that's what, that's really what this whole journey is all about. I mean, you do things that make, and what you said about from doing these kind of shows and the things that you learn from people and their stories. And, it is like a college degree master's on steroids. Steroids.
Big time.
And it's funny because as you're telling me all this stuff about what Adam created, I think back when we first met because a lot of, the computers were in its very infant stages,
Yeah, they were early.
I think it was like you and Scotty Hill were the only ones that I knew that, and maybe Snake that actually had, home desktops and, making CDs. That was a big thing, man. Like,
ridiculous.
Oh man, Vic, you're making us the CD tonight. We could listen. That was incredible leaving your studio with a CD, not a cassette.
Nuts, right?
Yeah. And like, and then, obviously, making MP, but like, it's funny, talking to you after all these years and how you're telling me about the next step or whatever, the next thing. And now I could see, I'm very uneducated to everything that you just mentioned, crypto and, 2.0. But I know now as I'm hearing it, I'm like, y'all have this down in a couple of years because it's going to be.
Yeah, totally. No. And you know what? Had it not been my exposure, Adam, I would know nothing about it either.
Right.
And do you remember Johnny Bronco? That strike a bell?
It absolutely strikes a bell. Yes, it does strike a bell.
John is like.
He was on MTV, right?
Well, he was on one of Adam's shows on MTV.
I think I do.
You're thinking of Johnny Bravo. That was the MTV thing.
Did he wear a big cowboy hat?
Yes, he wore the giant cowboy hat.
And he used to come down to the playpen and
totally.
Yes, yeah, I do remember. I remember.
Hilarious dude. Music, been recording forever, but ultimately got into cryptocurrency and owns a plane, like ridiculously wealthy, like, got into it. But, and he goes, I'm the CEO of my own Bitcoin company. That's how he views. And he'll send me a text. Hey, it's 2:00 on Wednesday. You know what time it is? Yeah, you just told me it's 2:00. Nope, it's time to buy more Bitcoin. He's like, he's just like totally into it. But he's done some cool things. The guest, dude, I had a PhD guy who's studying the effect on devices and social media on children. I had a guy on who sold his company to Cisco for $1.94 billion. I had a PGA pro golfer on who's won on tour. God, the list is so long, and the guests have been so diverse. I've had musicians on, musicians, radio, guys, like all this diverse experience. It's the best few hours of my week. It really is. And I have a good life. Like, I'm not complaining. I don't have a miserable job. I'm in my own business. Things are going well. I got enough guitars, right? That's all a guy needs, right?
Yep.
But this has been unbelievable for me. And I'm glad. I got to check out your podcast. I didn't know that you had one, so I got to subscribe to it.
But,
what platforms are you on?
We're through Pantheon. Do you know Pantheon?
Okay. Yeah,
so,
sure.
Yeah, it's, we're Apple, Spotify, and Don Jameson from that metal show. And
yeah, I know the name.
Sports guy who's on, Beer Money. And me and Don have been friends for a while. It's an idea I had many years ago because,
Okay.
musicians, you go on the road, or you're playing a gig. I'm such a big sports guy. I'm a diehard Knicks fan. What do we converse about? Sports. It's like asking an auto mechanic about, hey, what oil do you use on his time off? It's
Totally.
like, you don't want to talk music. So I noticed that a lot of musicians love sports and sports guys love music. You meet some of these rock guys like, Henrik Lundqvist. I listen to you every day. It's weird. And then, so that was the idea. And when I mentioned this to Don, he said that metal show was at some point thinking about franchising that sports show. So we kind of shopped it around. I made a demo called The Rock Strap, and that's the name of the show, back in 2002.
Dude, that is epic.
The Rock Strap, right?
The Rock Strap. That might be the greatest name I've ever heard of.
Well,
is that the name of the show?
That's the name of the show, The Rock Strap.
Fantastic.
But my original was Snake.
Okay.
Jack McDowell. Do you remember Jack McDowell, the pitcher? He's the one that gave, when he got booed out of Yankee Stadium, he gave the middle finger. He won a Cy Young Award pitcher.
Okay.
And we made a demo and we shopped it around, but it was like they wanted us to do all the work and none of us really had the time. And then when I talked to Don, we also showcased it. We made some pilots, but then all of a sudden Pantheon came and like, well, let's do this. They loved the idea. And like, next thing you know, we have a producer and,
wow, that's so cool.
And we do it every week.
That's what I'm missing here. I'm the producer. I'm the engineer.
It's better off.
I'm the booker of talent.
That's it.
The only thing I do have now for the past 2 months is my son creates all the shorts.
Okay. Yeah.
He's crushing it.
Yeah, of course, right?
Yeah, he's crushing it. He's unbelievable.
Well, that's what I did
fun.
For for the Electric Ballroom. I mean, we booked all the guests. I mean, Amy was only there for the first 5, maybe 8 years, and then it was all me, so I was, booking the talent, engineering it, editing it, producing it, playlists, the whole thing. And, it was such a labor of love. If you've seen what I got paid to do it, people be like, if you knew, but I enjoy it was therapeutic to me. It was my therapy every week. And I love talking to people and, and it was a diverse show, the Ballroom. It wasn't any, it was like, I'd have Rudy Ray Moore on one week. I'd have Robert Plant the next week. I'd have, Martha Davis from the Motels. I mean, rappers, R&B, rock, metal, as long as, you're interesting, cause I love all kinds of music and it didn't have any format and I enjoyed every episode. It just kind of, we made a list, when we started the show in 98 and we got every single person on that list except 2 people, David Bowie and Keith Richards. And sadly, we're not going to ever get David Bowie.
Yeah.
And Keith is like, I'm not going to do another year of this just to maybe get Keith. So, but as I know exactly what you're saying, Vic, and we never missed a week either, never, around the holidays, you put a bunch in the can and you just, cause people, you get on, you were talking about the guy from Iran that sent you that. I would get letters from soldiers that were over there.
So cool.
And like, dude, we listened to your show. We love the Electric Ballroom or, people in Italy and Greece. And they're like, those are the people when I feel like I don't, you know what? Those are the ones that kept me doing it for as long as I did, maybe it went 5 years too long because of just, life, I mean, cause I play a real lot and, I do 15 shows a week on Sirius and doing that Electric Ballroom show and, actually been actively playing and touring for, over a decade now. You got to make that commitment. And
tell me about the 15 shows you do a week.
I do 7 on Ozzy's Boneyard, 7 on 6 on Hair Nation. Oh no, 7 on Hair Nation, 6 on Ozzy's Boneyard, and David Johansen, and now at this point running the archives. So me and David, David's just like you, man. He didn't miss a show, didn't miss a beat.
Amazing.
And he'd have to go on tour sometimes with the Dolls for 3 months, 4 months. We would get together and sit there and do 14-hour days, getting 16 shows in the can, because, he didn't want to let the people down. And he's also a little thrifty. He didn't want to lose the money as well. But I
get it. It was a good opportunity for everybody.
Right. But so I know everything you're saying. And I saw some clips of your show, because when we hadn't talked in a while, and I thought your show was, you had Gordon on. I had
Gordon on. I had Reagan Richards on.
Yeah.
I had Ribbler on. Listen, Ribbler was my neighbor, but I got a lot of respect for Mark. He's done some cool stuff, and he's Stevie Van Zant's musical director, and so he's cool. I love Gordon. Gordon's a sweet soul and just an amazing dude and a super talent. Reagan can sing the phone book, as they say.
Yep.
Her voice is just absolutely stunning. It's incredible. You know what I told her? Hopefully she took it as the best compliment. I was trying to find a compliment to give to her that I thought would resonate with her. And I said, when I was making records, I had a partner in crime. His name was Jack Ponte. And we had a niche for recording different type parts. It was great because we keep the machine going 20 hours a day without each of us having to be at the console 20 hours a day.
Right.
So he'd cut these tracks, I'd cut those tracks. I always cut lead vocals. I produced lead vocals. And I said to her, your voice makes me wish I were behind the glass when you were singing these tracks. And I think she got it.
I know how much of a compliment that is, because, I've had the honors of making records with you, and I know how you work. And especially when it came to vocals, finding those harmonies. And now you would jump in vocally, and if we couldn't find it, you would find it. And you would wind up singing it because you found it. But I mean, so for you to say something about that is a major compliment. And I hope she sees this, just so I know she knows that, though.
Yeah. Well, they have a song called Mama Please. You might be familiar with it.
Yeah.
And I said to her, Reagan, that song kills me. I said, that vocal is perfection. I said, something was going on when you sang that song that was different than you show up in a nice mood and you whatever. And she goes, holy shit. She goes, let me tell you the story. And she goes on to tell me this long, elaborate story about her and Gordon arguing about the song. And they were in like a knockdown, drag out fight because they always, they would argue about the songs, right? Because they always wanted the same thing. They wanted the best songs. And they were each keepers of the music. And they finally settle it, and she gets all pissed off, and she goes, and she grabs Mike, and she goes, and I was sitting down just grinding this song. And it was anger and pain, and then I was pulling on the lyric and all this stuff, and I go, say no more. I go, that shit is all over that recording. I mean, just incredible. She's a super talent. She really is.
Yeah. I mean,
great.
And they're a great combo, and it's funny that we don't always get to see all the people that we've known, but it's, there's that special combo, that combination when you don't see somebody for a long time and you pick it right up where you left off. I feel that with you. I mean,
it's like it was like 2 minutes ago.
Right. And same thing with Gordon. I mean, I see Gordon, I'm honored to see him at least 2 or 3 times a year, but there was a period where we didn't see each other for a while. And it was like, there's those special people in your life, people.
He's still a little bit of your keeper, by the way, because when as my wife said to me, you should call that Keith Roth and get him on the podcast because she listens to your stuff on Sirius because she's going to the gym. She's the only one left in the house with a Sirius subscription.
That's it, huh? Right.
Yeah. Everybody else is streaming and, I'm listening to podcasts and not listening to a lot of music.
Right.
And, so I'm like, yeah, that's a freaking amazing idea. And I start looking through my phone. I'm like, how is that I don't have Keith's number? Okay. So I text Gordon and I'm like, hey, dude, you got Keith Roth's number? Yeah, here it is. But then the text goes, you better call him quick because he's going away for 2 weeks. He's like, he knew what was going on. He was managing your schedule. It was legendary.
I love him, man.
Oh, he's the best.
He is. And, there's such a great combination, those two. And, it's great to see so many people. You mentioned Mark Ribler. I mean, Mark working with Steve Van Zandt and Jack. And, these guys are having some of the best times in their lives now. That's why with that age thing, remember back in the 90s, like people would be like, oh, dude, you're 28. It's over. Kids, please do not listen to that. There's no time limit to anything. So, I mean, Lucinda Williams didn't really get rolling into her 50s. Ian Hunter, he's 85 years old, making the best music of his career. Those last 2 records he made. I saw the Stones, over the summer. And I see Mick Jagger running MetLife Stadium at 81. 81.
I have a friend who lives in Vegas who saw the Stones in Vegas. And he calls me the next day and he goes, you're not going to believe what I saw tonight. I go, what? He goes, I saw the Rolling Stones. He goes, dude, Mick Jagger, I think at the time he's 80. He goes, that dude is sprinting on stage. He doesn't have that old shuffle.
Right.
He goes, that guy is sprinting on stage like a gazelle.
He nailed it. He painted the perfect picture because MetLife, it's not a club. Yeah. It's not an arena.
No.
I mean, and you're looking at Keith and Ronnie and the guitars are blaring. They've never been, the band is very stripped down. They got Jordan playing drums. He's keeping everything at the exact tempos.
Yep.
They're not tuning down. It's like everything is unbelievable. And I've seen the Stones since 81, since I was a kid, undoubtedly the best show I ever saw him. It was one of those, you get it. You were jaded. You watch a big arena show or a big, arena stadium show. All right, I'm good. We could leave, beat the traffic. I was bummed when they got up to Satisfaction because I wanted another hour. And I can't remember the last time there, and I mean, Mick Jagger, he's got 20-year-old girls throwing them and he's like, just the way he's moving and grooving.
Crazy.
We saw him at a Knick game.
A lot of Pilates, a lot of yoga.
Yeah.
A lot of good, clean eating, right?
Well, the drummer in my band is Albert Bouchard, who played with Blue Oyster Cult from their first album, Burning for You, all that stuff. He's going to be 78 years old. He's our drummer.
Holy shit.
And the Dictators, it's not real. It's, there's a lot of energy that he needs. And he runs the New York Marathon and he's got to, and he'll tell you, and anybody will tell you, you owe yourself every day, not 6 days a week. You owe yourself, your body, your mind, 30 minutes of cardio. Yeah. That's what, you're going to sit there and binge watch. Well, one of those episodes, you need to be about you. And he's so right because, I try to run every day on the treadmill or whatever, and I don't do it. It's for mentally, it's therapeutic. And that's why Mick Jagger and Albert Bouchard and, these Ian Hunter, they're making music and they're enjoying their lives at an age where, you're not supposed to be doing that. It's all in the mind,
Tell me about the single you just released.
Oh, my first solo record.
Yeah.
The Law of Diminished Returns came out in April.
I downloaded the track.
Did you like it?
Freaking loved it.
Wow. Well,
now let me tell you why you loved it. Dude, you still pull in the legit vibes of the day, but in a modern twist. It's raw, it's punk, it's pop. It was great. It was really great. I loved it.
Thank you, Vic. I appreciate it. I mean, I played in the band, after Bad Biscuit, I played in a band called Frankenstein 3000 for many years. And we were very fortunate that we had enough of a fan base throughout the world where we could make records every year. And that was a blessing. No, we're not a household name, but, we were able to go to a place like Bare Bones and we could buy a pizza for Vic and we could pay you. And we got to do that every, for, 10, 11 records. So, but it just kind of ran its course. I mean, David Johansen had sang on some of our stuff, Cherie Curry. I mean, a lot of people have popped in and done stuff, but we made a 25-year compilation. And when the idea of, putting a best of, which really there's not like we had hits or anything, but I put my mind to it. Like I'm going to make the quintessential Frankenstein record, because some of the early stuff didn't have proper distribution. And I made I put up my blood, sweat, and we re-recorded some stuff. I found the originals. We remixed stuff. And I said, this is the quintessential record. So approaching it like my first album. But after that, I felt like the band kind of reached its.
What year was that, by the way?
That came out in November, like the 20.
I got to check that out. Is any of the original stuff we did on there?
Well, did we do Frankenstein? Might have started after you. I know we did. I remember with you we did Chrome Daddy, right?
We did Frankenstein.
We did. It was probably
it had Fox on the Run, the 16s.
No, that was Mutant Monster Beach Party.
Sorry. That was Mutant Monster Beach Party. Right. Right.
The band was Vic Pepe, Sean Mars, Keith Roth, Dave Halpern,
Damian Cordisco.
That was the band. And if you remember, they gave us, I think it was Caroline, right? They gave us enough money where, hey, Vic, they're giving us like $1,200.
I know.
They want us to record.
It was worth every penny.
Because Sean was the new singer of Skid Row, right?
Yeah.
So they want to put out a
Chrome Daddy.
Well, that was previous to that. We did that before. Yeah. That's when we started working together. The first project we did was Chrome Daddy. It was me, Scotty Hill, Sean, and Damien. That was all originals. Okay. And then, but we saw, wow, me and Sean we were so impressed with Vic, and like the studio's cool and it's going north, and it was like, it was far enough away from, it was out of Red Bank, and distraction wise.
And the town was amazing.
We were
vibes.
Chrome Daddy is when the Yankees won their first World Series against the Braves in '96, because we would go to the Jolly Trolley. We would take breaks. Remember in Westfield?
Oh my God, I totally remember that.
In Westfield. So we would go down there and take a break. We'd go to Jolly
Trolley.
Have a couple drinks, watch the game, and come back and work on the stuff. Yeah. That finally came out in 2014, by the way, the Chrome Daddy stuff.
Oh, did it?
Finally officially came out. But and then Mutant Monster, we pulled into your studio. We recorded 12 or 11 tracks. Everything, drums, bass, guitars, vocals, keyboards, background vocals, 4 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
Monday, we finished mixing. And then on Tuesday, you took us to see Tim Gillis.
And we mastered.
it. And then we didn't want to give it to the label after that. Remember?
Why? I don't remember why.
Because they gave us $1,200. And we were like.
And it was great.
And we were like.
Yeah, it was great.
And we had the studio, and we're like, $1,200, we could just pay them back. Let's take.
Yeah, exactly.
And they were pissed because they thought Sean was going to be in Skid Row. We're like, but Sean, I said, listen, Sean, they want us to make this record because they think you're going to be doing something with Skid Row, and I told him we don't have enough time to, and he's like, well, dude, we always talked about making these covers. We got on the phone on a Friday. We came up with the 11 songs. You were the next phone call. Like, Vic.
Amazing.
Do you have it? What are you doing next weekend? You got anything booked? He goes, oh, actually, my studio's open. I'm like, would you make a record with us for? You're like, well, let's try it. I'm down. And we called Damien and Dave, and we all went there, and we did like 12-hour days.
I forget. It was fun though, man. It was a great time.
No stress.
I have vivid memories of that.
And that I learned a lot from that. I'm like, you know what? If you're determined and you work, you work hard, but it's not really work because you love what you're doing. That became a blueprint of how I should make records. They don't always work like that.
Gordon Brown has a similar story. He says, when I met you, I finally met somebody as crazy as I was. He said he had songs recorded on ADAT from some other studio that had very basic tracks to a click track for some reason. I don't know why, or to a drum machine, maybe. He wanted to come to the studio and he wanted to record all the songs. He wanted to get real drums. He wanted to add some extra guitars. He wanted to have Rob redo the bass. And I think the vocals were pretty close to set.
Okay.
We recorded 48 songs in 2 days.
At Bare Bones?
At Bare Bones.
Wow.
And I have good news for him if he's listening. He called me back actually when I reached out to him for your number. He said, dude, do you have the masters from those sessions? I was like, I was just like, I don't know, I think I have them.
Wow.
I cleaned out an old storage room at a storage facility, temperature controlled, that I had for the longest time. And we grab one of these boxes and it weighs like 9 million pounds. And it's a Rubbermaid. And I crack it open and it's like ADAT tapes.
Wow.
I didn't go through it to see that the Mr. Reality stuff, or maybe he was called Highway 9 or Sam Hill or whatever it was called at the time. I haven't gone through it yet. If I'm a bet man, I have those tapes. And he's got a guy in Nashville that's got every tape machine known to man, every version of every tape machine, because you can buy this old stuff for like pennies now.
Right.
And he's got it all over the place, and he'll transfer it to Pro Tools.
You know what?
He'll have 48 songs. He's like, dude, you were insane. He goes, I just kept saying one more song, and you kept saying, why stop there? Like, dude, Halpern was a machine, like one take wonder.
Right.
Unbelievable. Killing it. Just completely killing it. But it was fun, dude. And I don't think I charged him anything for that. I forget why.
Maybe you were just enjoying it. You were enjoying it.
I knew Dave. I knew they were signed. It was cool for me. Some of the coolest stuff I've done has been on the whim. I recorded, I got a call from a buddy. Hey, you want to come to the city? This band, Babe the Blue Ox, was signed to RCA, and they're doing a live gig. Yeah, they're doing some live gig. My buddy was managing the band, and the guy who was supposed to engineer and record them live can't show up. And they had a console underneath with cameras, dual snake, and 24 tracks of ADAT. So I said, yeah. They go, we just want to use it for some pre-production. They were signed to RCA. Our A&R guy was Peter Robinson. And so I went there on a Friday. I recorded everything all, and all I made sure was the only thing I did was compress certain channels, and I cut everything flat. Wow. I didn't put any EQ on anything because I knew I didn't know the room. I didn't know the console. Like,
at least you could work with in post, right?
I'm just going to get the best sound I can with moving mics. And I recorded everything flat. And I brought those tapes back. Dude, cut the story short. They came in for 3 hours for overdubs. I was in the middle of another project, so my place had racks of outboard, and I mixed it over the next 2 days, 12 songs. They released it to radio. They said, this thing is better than our last record. Like, you recorded it, you captured us live. We came in and did minimal overdubs. It's unbelievable. The band is so raw and so cool. Yeah, so if you look that up, it was a pretty neat time. Fun stuff. So being in the studio is just so much fun.
When you're looking through those tapes for Gordon, see if you can come across the Chrome Daddy while you're in there.
I will. Yeah, I will. I'll take a look. As a matter of fact, we got to start digging through the stuff I kept from that storage unit. I've got in my garage now. That too is climate controlled. So we're in decent shape.
Yeah. I still have
What's next for Keith Roth, by the way?
Well, the record's out there, my solo record. So we're going to do some shows with Foghat. You remember Foghat?
Yeah, of course.
Roger Earl's still out there. We got first show is Patchogue Theater, May 17th. I mean, what real quick to wrap up the Frankenstein story.
Yeah.
I don't know where it's going to ever lead to, but I just felt after that comp, it was also our mutual buddy who you may remember, Danny Aniello, who plays with Angel.
Sprawl. And he plays with his idol.
Yeah, Punky Meadows. Right. I mean, so he said, he goes, Keith, some people, know you from music. He goes, a lot of people know you from radio. You kind of did this Frankenstein comp. You should, these songs that you're writing now and recording are a little out of the box for the Dictators and for Frankenstein. Maybe it's time to do a solo record, And
Danny said it to you.
Danny said it. And then Bob Pantella, who, we cut he played drums on most of the record, and we recorded most of the drums at Freak Shop, said the same thing. Like, yeah, dude, that'd be probably a better idea. And as soon as they said that, the floodgates open, and the way I was writing, I had a concept in my head. And I knew when the journey was over. And, and I got Danny and Punky to play on stuff, and Albert.
Oh, you did? That's so cool.
Well, Danny got Punky out of retirement because, Danny's one of those guys, if he's determined. And so
he's getting it done.
And I had the honors of writing a song with those guys that was on that record. And then they had Felix Robinson from Angel in the band, but then he had some health issues. So I wound up finishing that tour with them, East Coast, West Coast stuff. And I became pretty tight with Punky, and Danny and Punky are like, best friends. So, one song I was stuck on a melody. Danny helped me out, and he's like, Punky would be perfect to play the solo on it. But it was his idea that said, look, people from radio and you as a musician, it would be more to your benefit, for an opportunity for people to really know who you are,
Yeah, totally.
So, the record came out and it's doing pretty good. And, so we dropped a couple singles. The vinyl comes out the 25th, and I'm going to start doing some solo stuff. Dictators.
I love it.
We're getting back into that routine. We got, Little Steven's Cruise coming up next, in a couple of weeks with, I think Mark Ribbler's going to be on there. Right. And,
that's cool. Tell him I said, hey, when you see him.
Yeah. I mean, now that I know this history, and, Social Distortion. So we got some of that stuff coming up, and it's, I like being busy, man. People are like, how do you do all this stuff? It's like, I love doing it. So it's, as you know, man, if you dig what you're doing, doesn't matter how, there's no in between with me. I'm either out and about, or I'm Charlton Heston, the Omega Man. Like, I don't leave the house. There's no middle ground. You know what I mean? It's
love it.
It's either full on or like, I'll have a Grizzly Adams beard. It's like, there's no middle ground for me. So, I still feel like I'm 20 years old, man, to be honest with you.
Well, you look like you're 22, so you're still killing it.
You look the exact same. And I'm not saying that there's
I'm
no
doing
difference.
what I can. It's been a clean life, been a clean life.
And
hey boss, this has been an amazing 90. I had the best time. And I think one statement you made rings true. It didn't feel like 30 years. It felt like 30 minutes.
So true.
It's just so fucking cool, that when you reconnect with people and you chat and there's no break in the conversation, and it feels like we're going down to Ferraris to grab a slice, outside of Bare Bones, right?
I remember that. Didn't we see the quarterback for the Giants there one night?
Did we? I don't remember.
I thought we took a walk to go get pizza.
Maybe.
We had the broccoli and gabardine there. I remember we'd sit down.
The broccoli and gabardine came from Cosimo's.
That's right.
Which was to the right. And funny thing, that place is big now. The kids took it over.
Really?
So I was back in Westfield like 2 Christmases ago. And I go to my wife. I go, we got to go in for a piece of pizza. I go, I got to see if it's the same. And I go in the entrance, and I stop and I go, and the woman behind, she goes, you haven't been here in a long time, have you? I go, no. She goes, yeah. The place, I go, yeah, I was here like, 25 years ago. She goes, oh my God. I go, where are your parents? She goes, my father's retired. My mother's in the back somewhere, and they have a pretty expansive restaurant. They took down 2 more stripes. So that place might've been, 12, 15 feet wide and went straight back.
Right.
They took the next 2, and they got a nice restaurant there now. Food was still amazing.
Amazing.
Pizza was great. I mean, just cool vibe.
Yeah. I mean, I go there once a year, maybe once a year and a half, hit the Trader Joe's because they actually sell booze there. And I hit a sushi place in Westfield, which was really good. But now I have to go to Cosmo's. But I remember we'd go out, I'd take our dinner breaks, right? And we're walking by the barber shop, right? And I remember the quarterback for the Giants at that point was in there getting his hair cut. And
That's funny. I don't remember
you
that.
were
Maybe
talking
you were with
to
the
him.
guys from the band.
I could have thought
Who was the quarterback for the Giants at that time?
Dave Brown.
Oh my gosh, that's too funny.
I in the barber shop right next to the pizza place. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember for some reason I have a weird memory. I remember stuff 4 or 5 years old, but I remember Vic Pepe, man. That's for sure. It's
likewise. I remember my man K Roth, brother. Fantastic chat. I really, really, really appreciate you driving home from wherever the hell you were, bearing down on traffic, muscling through some technical issues with me, and having the best chat I've had all week.
Me too. And I really look forward to this because I knew there was no time limit on it. I was actually in Nashville the last 4 days. So
nice. What were you doing there?
I did a convention, Rockin' Pod, and I played at 3rd and Tinsley.
Sweet.
And, with this, for this event, I was down there for a couple days and just getting back. And I was saying, man, it's going to be weird. Tomorrow I'm going to be back in Jersey. I'm going to be chatting with Vic Pepe. I haven't seen him in a while,
It's greatness. Hey, man, my best to you, to
my
the
best
family.
To you. Same.
Let's not be strangers. I'm going to be back in Jersey in the summer. I'm going to give you a shout. We got to get together, and whether it's a beer or a whiskey or a Diet Coke or a water, let's get together and hang out.
Well, the Diet Coke is poison, so definitely the beer or the whiskey. I'm down with that.
I stopped the Diet Coke, by the way. I gave
did?
it up. I did.
You were into it.
Dude, I was double fisting it.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I was double fisting it. And now, this is what's left of my tequila drink for the night. So
one? Is it one a night?
On the show, it's one.
Yeah.
I don't do one a night. I probably have 1 or 2 drinks a week. I'm not a big drinker.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go days or I'll have a couple. If I'm sitting with you, I'd have 2,
Yeah, exactly.
I don't have much, the old days, all I got left is my vape, which I make myself. There's no carcinogens, and a couple White Claws, and occasionally a belt or 2, but that's about it.
We just got to make sure there's no more Yang tonic, because that can lead to bad things for the women.
We could still produce.
We can. We can still produce. All right, brother, man. I love you.
I love you too.
Night.
It has been great. Peace.
Cheers.
Please don't forget to like, comment,